Welcome, everyone. My name is Jasper Degens, and I hope you've been enjoying SmartCon so far. I know I have. I'm going to be giving a presentation on interactive artistic thinking using blockchain as a medium. So what we're going to be talking about is actually exploring some of the new artistic possibilities that are enabled by using and utilizing blockchain technology. So we're going to look at how that can create some new experiences for owners and participants. Also look at how artists can actually reimagine their work and change the way that they create or execute their artistic proposals and visions. We're going to look at actually how blockchain technology can break down some of the barriers between the audience and the artists. And then this is a dev session, so we'll look at some code and artistic systems and have some interactive components, and I'll be sending some links in the chat that you can participate and join in on. So it should be fun. I'll also try to monitor some of the questions in the chat. So if you have questions, just fire them there and we can jump in and take a look. So some background on who I am. Background is in computer science, actually. So didn't start off in the technical field. I actually started off more in the software science, like psychology and philosophy, but actually shifted, took some programming courses, kind of fell in love, and have been in the computer science industry since then. I started off working actually in financial software. I went to the UK and worked for a company that actually looked at royalty distribution, which is very relevant now that there's all these kind of fascinating new royalty schemes and distributions that are possible through the NFT space, but that's a topic for another day. Won't go too far in there. But what I really loved about technology, and especially computer science, is how it pairs amazing with any and every other industry out there. So first, finance, for instance, and royalties, working with like gaming companies, working with publishers and working with some artists there, but also looking at how technology can really empower other industries like the arts. And one thing I was thinking about 5-6 years ago was this growing disconnect between kind of individuals and technology, because we have so much interaction and so much use of technology in everyday life, but there's a bit of a growing disconnect, especially when thinking about kind of creativity. And so realize that there's tremendous potential in the art space. And so pairing technology with art opens up new ideas to get everyday people kind of inspired and thinking creatively about what technology can do. So I found this really incredible art collective called Team Lab in Japan, and they were doing public, interactive, immersive installations. I contacted them about 5 years ago, took a job with them, joined the art collective, and since then have been doing large-scale, immersive, interactive art installations around the world. Things like projection mapping, things like projecting into water, giant 80-meter-long water sculptures. We've even developed and built some entire museums in Japan and in China, and we're kind of rolling out these large installations around the world, which has been pretty exciting. And looking at kind of how you can utilize space and kind of this fusion between digital components as well as physical spaces to create these really interesting and unique experiences. Working in that space, a friend of mine actually contacted me a little over a year ago and said, hey, there are these really interesting developments happening in the blockchain space. Like, are there any possibilities to combine sort of what you do with what I've been thinking about? As we talked more, I became really fascinated in actually thinking of different models for not only having digital and physical experiences, but ways that you can actually own those experiences and merge ownership and experience. So we got together with a couple other members and we co-founded Strata Gallery about a year ago and have been doing some interesting projects ever since. So Strata, just to give you a brief idea of what we do. Our mission, really, what I'm trying to do is design and develop new artistic experiences in interactive art that really couldn't be done any other way other than utilizing some of the blockchain technology, and really bridge physical and digital art in a meaningful way. Because as I mentioned before, our lives, our daily lives are really fractured between the digital and the physical, and we kind of move between the two seamlessly. Like we have our little handy phones all the time, and most of the work that we do now is is a lot of it takes place in a digital fashion. So really trying to bridge those two together through art is quite exciting, quite interesting. And then we just want to work with artists to continue and extend their artistic visions and proposals in the blockchain space. So why art in the blockchain? So as I've been kind of alluding to, there's some new possibilities that have opened up. And some things I want to focus on today are really the combination and interesting pairings between utility and ownership. So some of that comes with kind of collaborations between individuals to create art. Some of that is actually some permissioned interaction and utility that comes with owning NFTs. And also this layer of merging experience with ownership. So I have some use cases that I'm going to talk about in the larger space that I find really interesting. So one that's more on the fun side is Pullup Art. So some of the stuff that they do is they've created this platform where holders of specific NFTs, holding that token actually enables you to participate and contribute pixels to this larger canvas. And that's kind of fun because it's using NFTs as sort of a gatekeeper and permissioning certain people to participate, but it's allowing a group of people to all draw on the same canvas and create, in this case, it was for the London Fork, create a work of art. Now this in itself is also an NFT. So that NFT can for instance, go up for auction, maybe be donated to the core devs for the fork, or could even be auctioned for charity, or you could have the participants like receive some royalty percentage. So really interesting ways you can leverage the collaborated and the collaboration between individuals for projects. Another example I love, which is more on the permissioned interaction side, is what Async Art is doing, but also kind of their new async music. And the idea that an artist is able to create a framework and then allow people to kind of play in that space. So the idea that a musician can create different sort of stems for their tracks and allow people to fluctuate between the tracks, to have some ownership and some interaction in how the final music sounds, but that's all within kind of the framework of what the artist had in mind. So it's a combination and a layered approach where you have the artist that has some control, but also participants that can influence the final piece. And that's related to what we were trying to do with Whole Picture, which is a collaboration between us at Strata, as well as artist Hector Falcone. And Hector Falcone, he created this artistic proposal called constructive modular extraction, looking at, instead of adding things to canvases, what actually happens when you start extracting pieces of the art, which is a pretty interesting proposal. And you can see here, I have a little animation playing, but you can see that he's actually cut out circles from his canvases. And what that does is it allows you to combine different modules, combine different canvases. And as you move them, it reveals the layers that are underneath, and you create new dynamics every time you move the different layers. So what we were trying to do is actually take this piece and sort of reimagine it and see how we could extend it and create a continuation that creates a new experience in the blockchain space. So part of this proposal is all about the movement of the piece. I actually have a little clip here. If I just show here, you can see this is an image of some people moving around the actual physical canvases in a physical space. And part of the dynamic is really allowing the audience and inviting them in to participate and move to create these new dynamic pieces as they're shifting modules, as they're changing modules, and as they're just becoming connected more to the actual physical pieces. But when you extend that into a digital space, like let's just talk about digital first before we get into the blockchain specifics. Once you extend that into a digital medium, you actually can add some new interesting properties. So very basic level, you have new freedom in how you move around the layers. So as someone who's maybe an owner or participant, very easy to move layers in any dimension. So you're no longer constrained by maybe the physicality of moving them. You can move them kind of in any dimension. You can also change things like the scale of the canvases. You can change different properties like the rotation. So you have new flexibility on how you actually interact and view the artwork. And kind of more importantly, you can do things like animate the artwork as you see here. And when you animate, you can create unique animations each time. I know I'm playing just a little loop right here, but for viewers and owners of these pieces, actually, they can automate their movement so that the movement is always random and dynamic and creates new patterns every time. So that's a new way to engage with the piece that just adds a lot of value to the work and allows you to experience it in different ways. However, when you then add in the blockchain medium, as I like to think about it, there are new interactions and properties that are also possible. So what we did with this project is we created an actual art event where the owners of the pieces could actually co-create the artworks and participate and have influence over which modules, so which canvases their final NFT would consist of. So the core idea behind this was that owners, it was a combination of some choice powered by what the owners would decide, like which canvases they liked, as well as some chance, which was by the VRF, our friends Chainlink, obviously. And one of the co-founders, Brock, I think he spoke earlier today on how we use the VRF specifically for this project. But in terms of this, the choosing process, so the influence that owners have, basically what we did was create a system that every 4,444 blocks, you would be presented with a canvas and you'd have a choice on whether you wanted to take that canvas and secure it to your NFT. Otherwise, you could wait and then you'd be presented with a new canvas. At the end of the process, everyone would still, every NFT would consist of 4 canvases, but you have influence over which canvases would consist of your 4. So these 4, for instance, are 4 that I really like that I tried to construct when I was part of the art event. But every owner has this dynamic of, oh, do I select this one or do I wait? And you can create a whole experience around building and designing and kind of collaborating with the artwork. Still, the framework was set by the artist. So we had a select about 50 canvases from Hector that were as part of the canvas, the module pool. But which of those you would have at the end was determined by choices that you made. So turning it into an experience was something that we found really fascinating. And the way we did this, maybe jumping into a little bit of the technical elements, is that this was back at a time where gas prices were astronomically high. So what we wanted to do was actually try to create a system of implicit interaction or implicitly dynamic. So change the state of the contract that doesn't actually require interaction or transactions. And how we did this was basically recalculate the state of the contract based on some dynamic property, like timestamp, or in our case, we use block number. And what would happen is the contract would automatically update as new blocks were added to the chain. But when a user wants to intervene and actually, in our case, secure one of the modules for their artwork, they can actually submit a transaction and that adjusts the future state for the contract going forward. So the invariant here really is that the past and present states, they're always going to be deterministic, but the future state would change upon interaction and transactions. Pretty straightforward, and I'll just maybe show a bit of the code, but we think that this method it actually has a lot of different use cases. Very simple to set up, but it's pretty interesting and worked well. It doesn't require you to kind of send gas into the abyss. Instead, you can kind of have your works changing automatically, but then only intervene when you want to secure, in our case, one of the modules for your artwork. So let's see. I think I'll just jump into some of the code here. Very brief. So, for example, here's the main contract. I'm just going to minimize some of these windows here. And most is powered by actually this one function that looks at getting the current action. So we broke down our event into different actions. And an action would be when the canvases swap. So all we would have to do is actually, if the event started, we just calculate the action based on the current block number and divide by the blocks per action. So in our case, this is 4,444. And that gives us actually the current action we're on. And you can see this is all happening inside of a view function. So no need, we can just call this as we're reading back the state of our canvases. This is really driven by the one function to know which canvases you have is function kind of get canvas IDs, which you can also see as a view function. And what this does is it basically gets that current action and the layer. And then what we do is as I was describing before, we recalculate all of the past states. And the invariant is that every time we recalculate any state that's happened in the past, we know it's going to be the same. So that we can actually get the same result that we have every single time. So we know that previous actions will never change. And you can see here, this function, if we look at get the canvas ID for action, this is looking at one specific canvas. And what we're doing is we're starting back at the first action and we're leading up to the current action we're on. And we basically can look at the history, see if it's been locked in the past. And then if not, we return that canvas. Otherwise, we keep on searching until we find a canvas that isn't locked. So past events, past canvases that were locked, if they were locked in previous actions, we'll kind of skip over those canvases. Otherwise, we'll keep on advancing the canvases. And these functions are all called, they're view functions, so we don't have to, you don't have to spend any gas to read from them, and automatically the system will just update as new blocks are added to the chain. So this was fun because, I mean, basically, it's a process where you check every 4,000 blocks and your artwork is going to change, but you don't have to do anything. And you only have to intervene when you want to change the dynamic of the piece. And you're kind of, everybody is in the art event together. So you're kind of competing with people, but it's also a collaborative event. So pretty fun way to utilize the blockchain to actually create an experience that wouldn't be possible any other way. You could imagine trying to bring everybody into a physical gallery and showing them different pieces and then rotating around the room. But this actually enables us to create a scalable event that elapses over time to kind of continue and try to engage with our audience. So one thing I wanted to do for this presentation in particular is maybe dive in and give a little bit of a demo on how one can try to reimagine things that like an artist or anyone who's not an artist as well, but how you can try to reimagine some technology in a blockchain context and actually find how you can add value through utilizing some of the possibilities in the blockchain. And so I first moved to Japan about 5 years ago, and one hobby that I became especially involved in, which was a lot of fun, is VJing. So having these audio visual events where you'd have kind of live musicians, but also live visual artists, and you'd pair them together to create an interactive audio visual experience. And recently I've been thinking about, well, what are some ways that you could actually combine ownership and experience to add value and create new dynamics with a live performance? And so what I would like to do for the next, I think we have about 10 minutes left, is walk through and do a little bit of a demo on how an artist might think about designing such a system, and then what the real value is on putting some of the system on like a blockchain network. So we're going to jump in and do a little bit of a demo here. So what I've set up is a little touch designer. For those, maybe some of you all have seen this before, but this is basically, I'll just maximize this. This is kind of an output for, actually, let me turn this on. Let me actually start this up. So this is a piece of software called Touch Designer. It's like a node-based software that allows you to do real-time visuals and and work in 3D, 2D. It's really exciting. So this is a fun little mini project that I've set up that, it's SmartCon, so a little bit of SmartCon theme in here. And what I have in this window, it might be a bit small, but basically I'll just keep this over here, are some parameters that I've exposed that would allow you to control certain properties of this set that I have here. So one example might be, for instance, things like these look like they're flat panels, but they're actually little cubes that can shift and move around. So pretty straight. I think maybe hold on one second. Let me change this into performance mode. So this might be a little smoother. I think that should be a bit smoother. Let's see. So I have these different parameters, and the different parameters will affect different things. So we can, for instance, move the pieces about. We can also kind of move and actually see that we're on this field of cubes. We can also sort of rotate around. And so you could imagine that a lot of this would be timed with kind of real-time audio. So this would maybe happen on the beats. We can also like zoom out. We can also do fun things like look at maybe some post-processing effects. So change the way that some of these things look, maybe give it a little neon glow, like people imagine Tokyo has, which it does have. You can also change properties and kind of fracture it and turn it into little glass pieces that move around. And then changing these different properties, I mean, it really just changes the dynamics of the piece. So it's kind of fun to play around with, and you can get these really cool visual effects that then can react to, for instance, live music or other live events. So next year, if Chainlink is doing an in-person event, we could maybe have some music and have some Chainlink blockchain-based kind of VJs happening. But what's great about this is that I've kind of exposed some of these parameters here, but where these parameters are driven from could be from anywhere. So they could be from my computer, as you see here. Typically, if you're performing, you might have some like a little MIDI controller. That's how we would typically do it. But they could also be driven by a contract and some parameters that live on chain. So if I go here, we can see I've put up a little contract, and let me actually share the link in the chat here. Let's see if this works. All right, let me just share this because everybody can actually, if you have some Rinkeby test ETH sitting around, you can actually participate in a second here. But I've put a contract live on Rinkeby, and the code itself, I mean, very straightforward. We have a couple interaction types that I've exposed. There's move, noise, and zoom. And what you can do is you can submit transactions like a move, a noise, or a zoom transaction, and those will update parameters that I have exposed on the contract that I can then read into my live performance here. So you can see, for instance, if we look at, let me just submit, maybe I'll just submit one right now, and we can see what happens. And yeah, anyone and everyone feel free to participate and jump in on the fun. But you can see, for instance, if I submit a transaction, after a little bit, you can see it starts to move because I submitted the move transaction. Once the parameter is updated, and I'm pulling that into the live performance, and you can see, for instance, the address is just shown up here, so you can see who would be interacting in real time. So if anyone is out there, I encourage you, go ahead, feel free to play around and either do the move, the noise, or the zoom function, and it should update this performance kind of in real time, which is fun. And we can see even here on the read, okay, let me just make this window. I'll just put these over here so you can all see them kind of reacting hopefully in real time. And hopefully we got some other addresses popping up here because that's always fun when people are interacting. So here you can see this transaction just went through, and now we have this new effect. You can tell that I haven't exposed all of the parameters because a lot of times for performances, maybe, and for artistic systems, even in the example of whole picture, we didn't allow people to add their own canvases. It's still within the framework of the artist. But that combination of the artist deciding which areas do I want people to be able to interact with, and which areas kind of I want control over is a really interesting balance. Because here, for instance, I might want control over kind of this fracturing effect here, or I might want control over this other parameter, like zooming in and out to make different effects, but I might want the audience to have control elsewhere. So you can really play around with how you fracture those responsibilities and how you fracture those different design choices when creating any artistic system. So you can see that we have the interaction parameters exposed here, and for this programming language, for example, in Touch Designer, it's using Python, but because they use a special type of Python, we actually can't even we can't use Web3 Py. So instead, you can even do fun things like, for instance, right now what I have running is a little web server that creates a little socket server that's just sending WebSocket messages to my Python based Touch Designer application here. So you can really, Web3, what the most exciting parts of Web3 is you can just play around. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, some people are joining in. Nice. That's great. Yeah, fantastic. So you can play around with how you send data, where you drive data from, and that opens up really exciting new possibilities. So the demo so far, it's mostly been on kind of what types of things are possible, especially with driving different parameters. But why would someone actually want to do this? Where does the value add really come into play? And the last thing I want to talk about is where you actually can drive that value and where some additional value comes from. And basically, you can take a lot of these interactive processes a step further. So instead of just having it drive data, in our case, what we can actually do is talk about kind of merging the experience and owning that experience, what I alluded to before. So for instance, one thing we could do is we can mint the screenshots that participators, like the screenshots after someone collaborates and participates, we could mint those screenshots and then send them to participants. And that's actually kind of what we're doing here. So every time someone has anytime someone participated, we actually create a capture of one of the screenshots, and that is then minted, and now the collaborator basically owns that. So whoever is A8CDF0ED, their address starts with that, like you'll have these nice new screenshots minted to you, which is kind of exciting. And that allows people to kind of, as I said, you can own some of that experience, and different benefits can occur from that. So for instance, a lot of times, some of these performances from top visual artists, they actually can mint those performances, and then maybe contributors or collaborators from that live performance could receive part of those royalties. So one example that happened actually with one of the groups out of Japan, like Rhizomatics, they do a lot of the set design and visuals for the band Perfume, and recently part of their visual set, they actually minted it and sold it on Polygon chain for about 20,000 Mantic. So there is precedence for this, but how cool would it be if part of this performance was also driven by people that were interacting with the performance, and maybe they receive kind of part of that royalty, or they receive fractional ownership of the final performance. So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of extend value depending on how you design systems. You could even have future utility like the NFTs. If you own one of these collaboration NFTs, you could get discounts to future events. So that's something that could be pretty exciting as well. And the goal is that through some of this technology, really it creates ways that you can have long-lasting value and actually develop community. Because if you have an NFT from someone that you went to their event and you participated in that final output, that could be really, really exciting and just a way to tie you to the artist in a meaningful way. So I think I'm close on time here. love to get in touch with anyone who found this interesting or wants to talk about anything. Some of the information there, but have had a pleasure. Hope you all have had a good time listening, and yeah, be in touch. Thank you all.
All right, and thank you so much, Jasper. That was awesome. The audience was loving it.